2024 to order. We have a land acknowledgement which I will read, and I'm taking the liberty of just adding a few things on my own here. So, we gather on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, our gratitude to their enduring presence and care of the land that sustained all of our ancestors and sustains us all now. We move together in all our relations in a spirit of reconciliation. Okay, so we have an agenda in front of us, and I will entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
Before we do it, can I make a motion for an addition?
Certainly, please do.
It is a contract matter with third parties.
Okay.
As 9B.
9B, in addition. Contract item. All right, then I will entertain to adopt the agenda as amended.
No, we need to do a
Oh, right.
motion to
That's right.
approve the addition.
So first,
I'll do that for you.
okay, please do.
I will put a motion to approve the addition to the agenda.
Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Now I will ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Councillor Brown?
I make a motion to adopt the agenda as amended of the committee of whole held the 5th day of November 2024.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. So we'll get right into it. We've got a couple of delegations, and first up would be Ryan Dick from the Old Man River Regional Services Commission. And Ryan, if you'd like to take the podium, you've got the floor.
Hello, everyone. I understand we've got some time today to talk about some land use plan matters. And I've been asked, and thank you to staff for asking me to come talk about municipal reserve and all the things sort of related to that in the community planning context. Try to be sort of quick here and get into some discussion. I really want to get home and watch the election results. On a little aside there, I was just in Montana presenting at the Montana Planners Conference, and they put on there my name, Old Man River, Lethbridge, Montana. And I wasn't sure if that was an invitation to join or a gesture or what it was. But,
Think of an invasion.
yeah, or they were looking to annex some territory. I don't know. But I had a good time down there just a few weeks ago. Planning. So as you know, there's lots of facets to planning. School site planning, park planning. There's just a few of them, but really it comes down to you need solutions for current problems and some ideas for the future. I understand we probably have some current problems we have to address, and we probably need some ideas for the future. So I'm going to give you a quick primer on municipal reserve. Some of you will be certainly familiar to some degree, and for others it might be sort of a new topic. So I provided a bunch of legislative excerpts here, and those will be quite boring. Municipal reserve is fairly complex. So that's where I think it's best to start. Municipal reserve is essentially a tax on land development. How it works is a municipality can take up to 10% of the pre-subdivided land area and allocate that either as a land dedication or as cash in lieu of a land dedication. However, and if you look at section 663 on that first page, there are exemptions to the ability to do so. And we often run into those exemptions. Say for a community that's within a quarter section of land, 160 acres, 10% of that is 16 acres. That's all you get. You can't get any more unless you purchase it, right? In the subdivision context that we come across in the town of Cardston, we often have a context where it's less than 0.8 hectares, 663 sub C. So we only started taking municipal reserve in the post-war years, generally speaking, right? Whereas the town of Cardston was creating far But if we get a subdivision that's less than 2 acres, we can't take it, no matter what, right? In a rural context, which isn't applicable here, but just so you know, a first parcel out of quarter section, municipality can't take reserve either. The other exemptions, if it's an agricultural subdivision of 40 acres or more, can't take reserve. And lastly, if you've already taken reserve, of course you can't double dip, right? So those are the exemptions, and again, we often run up against those. That's really how we get municipal reserve 99% of the time. Of course, the council can acquire and then designate by bylaw municipal reserve. Perhaps I'll back up at this time and have you flip to the types of reserve that needs to be the second last page there. So we usually talk about municipal reserve or MR, but that is not just for, it's also, as the legislature intended, for school sites, right? And you're supposed to work with the school boards in your community to decide how and where to allocate that 10% land area. And only in recent years, and this is in large part to do because of the lack of communication between municipalities and school boards, has the legislature mandated what we call joint use and planning agreements. I'm sure you've heard about those, and maybe you've already been working on them. But if you haven't, that came into effect in 2017. And firstly, I believe it was a 3-year window to get it done. Then they extended it to 2023. They've again extended it to 2025, I understand it. March. There you go. So I think for on both sides of, whether you're a school division or municipality, it's probably long overdue to get that channel flowing. We need to have something like this. We're only starting to see them come in the region. I haven't personally been dealing with any. Our organization has been to some degree helping with them, but in large part it's the school divisions and the municipalities directly. So what these agreements hopefully will do is not just talk about joint use areas, but talk about future school sites. Where are they going to go? How are we going to get them? Who's going to pay? Right? And the province has said, or made it clear at least, that in order to allocate capital funds for a new school site, it's got to be serviced. They don't want to pay for any of the servicing costs. They want an intact site with servicing up to the property line, and then they'll levy it. But it's a competitive process, right? So it's a tricky thing. Anyways, I brought that up because in this list we have MR, but it's really MR, SR, or sometimes you'll see MR/SR, municipal reserve / school reserve. For some of the older school sites, I'm not sure in town, some of them don't have that SR suffix. They were dedicated a long time ago. They don't have that. Doesn't much matter. But for the new sites going forward, they always want that SR dedication. The other types of reserve are environmental reserve. And in short, we take that when lands aren't developable in the subdivision context. Say, along the creek, there's stuff within the flood. You can take that as environmental reserve. Having to buy it or anything like that.
Councillor Burton had a question.
Question, Ryan, back to that agreement that you are calling it. So if you look at the description of the exemption you described, what's kind of obvious is that the town tends not to have very much in their kitty. The county tends to have a massive amount in comparison, just because of the nature of those exemptions and having written large checks towards the counties. I know what's in there. So my question is, when it comes to the school reserve, the counties tend not to do as many schools as the urban centers. Is there any adjustment anywhere in the scheme of that agreement or concepts put forward by the province of contribution from the surrounding rural municipalities, MR, towards the school fund? How does that work? The guy with the least is paying the most, the guy with the most is paying the least, and they all use it together. How does that work?
But one example of including the urban versus rural challenges.
I can speak to that.
Yeah, probably not.
I'll speak to that if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, go ahead.
I spent actually the bulk of yesterday working on the JUPA, so I can speak to that a bit. So, right, the province expectation, and why I wanted Ryan to speak tonight is you've had a number of presentations recently of, we'll call them public sector, quasi-public sector organizations looking for reserve land for activities. Hospital, Francophone school, senior care facility. We're going to talk about daycare a little bit later. And we're not sitting on really anything of substance as a community. The Francophone school, I think, is the most pronounced example. So they're looking for land and servicing. So we're also simultaneously on these JUPAs. Mayor, you've been involved in some of this discussion because we're working with some of our, I'm doing the draft for our regional partners right now. I guess if we got volunteered for that, I'm not 100% sure, but the point is I'm working on that for the group. The province's position is that they would like to see the towns have this ready, but the legislation, and you please correct me if you disagree, Ryan, the legislation essentially says the municipality has to participate so far as they have the capacity to do so. We can't just come up with, 20 acres of prime land at huge market and then run services for 5 miles, right? That's not reasonable. So there is some reasonableness in it. To your question, Councillor, and I'm scrolling because I'm trying to find the clause. And there's some disagreement on this, by the way, but in the joint use planning agreement that we are using, which is a fairly well-known template, in fact, it's the one, Ryan, I think you referred to at ORS. And I'm sorry, I'm scrolling and trying to talk at the same time, but essentially what it says is that if the beneficiaries, or if that school is going to service residents of more than one municipality, then they need to negotiate with both municipalities.
Does it stop there, or are there parameters or guidelines to that?
That's basically where it stops. And so that's something that our intermunicipal board is going to work with, and I'll be encouraged, in our particular case, the Francophone School Division, to be saying, you have a number of students within the county, need to negotiate with them. Maybe that helps us defray, for example, and I don't have any numbers here, so this is not negotiation. Let me be clear, conceptually. Maybe it helps defray servicing costs. So the county would use MR to contribute to servicing costs for a parcel within the urban valley, conceptually. So I would say, my opinion is, and I would stand to be corrected, that the legislation is weak on the intermunicipal cooperation with regards to MR. So the agreement is trying to be a bit stronger.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And it's no coincidence that the notion of the JUPA came about at the same time as the ICFs were introduced, right? Which was largely pushed around recreation and other shared services. So although there aren't parameters or really a financial framework, I expect that there'll be some precedent we could probably learn from in other places. So I don't really have much in terms of examples there.
Okay, that's a good answer, thank you.
Just rounding down that again on the little backgrounder on reserve, environmental reserve, and we have a little bit of that along the creek corridor. Environmental reserve can be taken as a title or as an easement. So we sometimes see, depending on the nature of the water course, if it's likely to move, you want an easement, or in a public access isn't desired, you might want an easement versus a title. The last form of reserve is called Community Services Reserve. This was introduced not so long ago, and it's really for school facilities when they're turned over other kind of quasi-public uses. I don't think we have many examples of the Community Services Reserve in the region. Really, as planners, it's predominantly municipal reserve, and it's predominantly in a subdivision context. So that's usually at the municipal planning commission level, unless there's an area structure plan or something like that, a statutory plan that sets up a framework for subdivision development. Of course, council would be involved. So I gave you some examples here of quick subdivision history for the town. And you can see that over the last 10 years, we've had very little dedications, and that goes back to the exemptions. A lot of our subdivisions, sometimes it's little boundary line adjustments or the creation of parcels. Those are usually under 2 acres. So these are areas where we will never realize the reserve. In the other instances here, there was a cash in lieu requirement, right? So we didn't need land at this location. And where you require cash in lieu, the municipality has to account for it separately. It can't just go into general revenues. That's been a problem over the years for some municipalities. These, just to give you an idea, were the valuations that were used. The valuation process is either by market value appraisal or an amount agreed to by the applicant for subdivision municipality. Usually what most places do around here is take assessed value of the land, hybrid, as opposed to requiring appraisals for everything. So that's where those valuations likely come from, is from assessed value, and it's a pre-subdivided land valuation, what it's based on. So that sort of gives you a quick Coles notes on reserve. Again, it can get quite complex and nuanced once you get into these particular subdivision applications. And when do we defer? When do we take? The principle with deferring is that if we expect future subdivision, re-subdivision of a parcel, we'll defer by caveat, meaning at the next stage, next subdivision application, we take it then until the subdivision is finite, there's no longer any anticipated subdivision activity, and then you get the most in terms of market value. Any questions on MR?
You can also defer by agreement with the developer, just to postpone for some period of time, because we did that at the time.
Yeah, there's ways to do that to ensure set up
We
payments.
might do that on the river bottom.
You don't know that off the top of my head.
We took the ER and the trail along the edge. So we used to take the road.
So Jeff, this hasn't been a real burning issue for us, but what do you think this means for us moving forward, to us or the next council?
Yeah, and so the reason I wanted Brian to come today is we need to, in the next meeting or two, have some discussions about how we're going to accommodate some of the people that are looking for lands, particularly MR, and particularly the school. And so, if I might, Mr. Chairman, one of the questions I have for Ryan is, when we look at our vacant lands in the town, we have area structure plans that overlay most of them. In fact, almost all of them, with the exception of some stuff to the south that isn't expected to develop that densely. So, in those, there are places allocated for future green space, for future MR, school reserve, those types of things. Have you seen, and is it best practice, that because we haven't designated those lands to this point, do we attempt to acquire them and designate them now so they're there for that future use? And that may be prohibitive. It may be simply cost prohibitive. You may not be able to do it. It may be logistically prohibitive. But I'm thinking particularly, and I think I understand it right, especially with schools. All of our schools now own their land fee simple. They own it, title to it, it's owned. It's not MR. But going forward, we want that on MR because if it's ever considered surplus or the school's not there anymore, now the Act has mechanisms for the town to have that back for other uses. So my question is twofold. How do you see us positioning ourselves to have proper MR for maybe more recent demands than we currently maybe thought a while ago? And two, would you agree that those types of services need to be on MR going forward?
Yeah, I think, and usually the trouble that I've experienced, and it's most palpable in the town of Coldell when they went about their site acquisition for the new high school, because it came in really quick. All of a sudden, Councillor needed a new high school, and the province had said, we've got the money, we need the site, where are you guys at? And then it was a crazy quick push. So from that experience, if we have any notion that we're in whatever 25-year horizon meeting a school site, I think a land dedication dedication is appropriate, you can always surplus that in the future, right? You can take the MR dedication off. You started as MR, you're not sure about the school's participation in it, and then you can sell it. You have to hold a public hearing, you have to sell the market value, or you don't need to advertise all that, right? But I think oftentimes we don't take that land, we're just not sure. And best to plan for it, of course. School sites are very emotional things, and there's an, as soon as you allocate a school site in a plan or something like that, people are going to make business decisions around that. Developers are going to look at that area differently, right? It's very strategic. In working with the town of McGrath on this, it's sort of a conversation that's been ongoing, but there's been reluctance to actually on the map, right? Because they know that things will happen as soon as that's. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but I think that, especially given how slow the absorption rate has been in the west area, structure plan area, and in the east, the opportunity arises where we could take a land dedication. That's probably something we should consider doing. And maybe it's, you have few, like most urban municipalities, you have few large areas left. So it's a 5-acre parcel, you get half an acre reserve. But hopefully there's maybe something in the bank to acquire some of those adjacent lands and put it together, start building a bigger site.
Councillor Burton?
So a year ago, we started working on some of the zoning area structure type issues. Well, I guess we started with land use bylaw. And this is the year that we proposed to go ahead and look at the area structure plan in the areas that you mentioned.
Yeah.
That seems like a natural thing to look at, looking at those area structure plans. Do you anticipate, Jeff, it being more urgent than, because we're already planning on looking at those area structure plans where we've had very low development, or perhaps a demand for a different type of development, let's say along the golf course pruning. Look at the area structure plan, doesn't look at all like what the people obviously want it, right? Yeah. So we've identified those areas that probably do a different area structure plan. And this is the year that we're going to work on it. Do you hurry that up, or would we do it independently of that?
So on the most, I would say the most pressing, and I don't want to get into details of negotiation in this meeting, but our most pressing is to accommodate Francophone School. And we do have municipally owned lands that they think would be excellent for that. So that's more a matter of designation than it is purchase and creation, right? The challenge is, and we'll know this probably by the end of the year, the challenge is the servicing costs may be substantial. And so we've got some work to do there, right? Because again, the schools are reading the legislation and saying, yeah, this is the place, to steal a phrase, and they're hoping that we just provide it service. But we might not be prepared to do that. So what if it's $150,000 to run services to that? Through the history of the town, we have $97,000 in cash.
My check was bigger than that to the county.
Okay.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about, that
Yeah.
disparity between the two. But that aside, so then when we're working on area structure plans, it'd be more future looking than trying the school or the hospital.
Yeah, and again, both of those we have parcels that if they would wish to proceed, I think we can accommodate some debate on utilities, but as far as land, we can accommodate.
But to add to that, if I may, I think, yeah, we'd be remiss if we didn't have those conversations when we open up the area structure plan. Yeah. The big struggle for me, like I've already said multiple times, is getting the school division to have those conversations. Now they're mandated to have to. But in my time doing this, I can't think of a time where, multi-lot subdivision and the school division was referred on every subdivision, never anything, right? They kind of exist in a silo, some more than others. With Palliser, I found it maybe a bit tougher to work with than some of the other divisions in the region, but yeah, I think the JUBAs are going to be good things once we get there.
Okay, Jeff?
I should just mention that you will be seeing a draft of the joint use planning arrangement probably in November. Like I said, I spent a great deal of time yesterday on it, and so the JUBAs not only deal with the land use planning portion, they deal with facility sharing, use facility management. management. And so I'm
This
just,
is the Lions part.
yes, so who's using what and what's available for the town to use and what's available for the schools to use and vice versa. So we've got to work through some of that. And I'm trying to write it looking at it with the Francophone School Division included in it too, because they seem to be viable there in the community. So you will be seeing that soon, and we'll talk more about it relative to school.
All right. Ryan, thank you for coming and talking about this. This looks like one of those tip of the iceberg things.
A little bit, and it makes me think that, we're kind of at this granular level right now, but it's natural that we're going to want to zoom out, and eventually, although maybe we're going to go a bit backwards, but we might get back to that municipal development plan layer and the IDP layer, and we've got to look at the whole context of the town. Are we at the point where annexation is something we should be looking at closer at? All those considerations.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate
you guys. Yeah, happy to come anytime.
Yep. Okay. The next item on the agenda is a delegation.
I'm going to check and see if they're here. What's that? No, it was someone different.
Council should get right on it.
Oh, that's good.
That's why I asked the question. I said us or the next one.
So what I'm going to do is I'm on this Zoom and then I'll share screens with Derek and see if how we go with that. Joe, have you seen Derek yet? Okay. Give us just 1 minute here, council. I'm just going to get their presentation going.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, you have Chopin Cash here, and then Derek's going to be joining us on Zoom. We're just going to wait for Derek. Here's the 1 minute. Can I speak to Ryan's presentation?
Absolutely.
Like I said, I think you termed it well, Councillor. It's a bit of a tip of the iceberg thing, and to Councillor Burton's point, I think it dovetails well in looking at our area structure plans. The legislation says that your MR needs to be considered in your MDP, your municipal development plan. So we may have to move it up one level further than just area structure plans, which is just procedural. That's fine. But yeah, you've been presented with a number of these types of uses, and we're just not sitting on a lot of municipally owned land. And so we need to be looking closely at where these things should ideally be. We're going to talk about, again, daycare. We're going to talk about those senior care facility presentation that was a little while ago. Well, where should those be, and then what's the role of the municipality in trying to see that land is available? Now, it isn't required that seniors care or daycare, for example, are on MR. It's not required for that. But it's still, if that's in the best interest of the community to have those in certain locations, I think we need to have a really good look at that and start planning for it. So
Well, the other issue is, say, take the Franklin School, their expectation, especially based on where they come from and past experience dealing with other municipalities, they may walk in and expect us to have reserves, and in fact, we have land, but it hasn't been set aside in the normal fashion that they're used to seeing, and they may expect that land at no cost to them.
I can tell you that's exactly the case, for sure. That's
And what do we do with them?
So I just have a question. So because we're sitting on so little, is it wise then to when we see, like let's say on the outer rim or I don't know where, we're looking at purchasing when land comes available? Like should we not be more focused on picking up more?
Sure. So purchasing and annexing are two different monsters.
I get it.
So we can buy land in the county and we can simply own land in the county if the county agrees, because it becomes not taxable, right? We have to be cautious about that as a municipality. Looks like Derek's here, so about just starting to acquire land in another municipality, they may just finally say, you know, you're taking all this out of our tax rolls.
But I was meaning within our
So
boundary.
yes, to that point, we may need to start looking at where strategically should we
Yeah.
be starting to have some larger parcels, and over time, working with those owners to acquire them. Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
So Derek, I don't know if you can hear us, but we're just going to queue up, Cash or Shilpa speaking.
Cash first.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll queue up Cash. Give me 1 second, and then, Mr. Chairman, we can get going here.
Okay.
Just 1 second. Next slide. Oh, because this way Derek can see what's going on.
Sure.
I think the slides are all mine.
Yeah, no,
Okay. All right.
First of all, good evening, council. Just introduce myself, Cash Shade, Chief Operating Officer by Cardston Health. And just kind of wanted to open up with a bit of update on kind of the operational side, and Shilpa will kind of take it over with the meeting presentation, which is the construction update. So yeah, I'm being kind of help with my background. It's been kind of a little foreign dealing with all the construction pieces to this point, but it's really exciting now because we're actually at a good point to start focusing on the operational planning, the recruitment, the retention, and some of the community engagement strategies. We're at that point right now where it's going to really pick up from now until the early part of next year, where we're really going to start to finalize that operational plan, and probably be able to share a lot more on whether that involves some partnering on just recruitment for positions. Obviously it's a big project. You know, there's going to be a lot of staffing needs that, you know, our members may or may not be able to fill, so we're going to be able to kind of share some of that info in the coming months. So with that, I don't know if Derek has any other opening comments, but before we turn it over to the construction specifics, I just want to give Derek a chance to speak.
Thank you, Cash. Thank you, Jeff. And again, good evening, Town Council. We're very honored to get a brief update to you as far as the the addictions and mental health challenges that our community, our nation faces. So we are, again, very honored to continue the partnership with Kronen and, building the recovery community. We look at kind of work that we've been doing, again, just in regards to the addictions crisis we faced over the last numerous years. We had established the Detox Center, our Bringing the Spirit Home, and the theme of our Bringing the Spirit Home is at times during that time of trauma, that time of intoxication, our spirits will leave us. So this is a healing journey, again, in all aspects. So the work we've done was very, it instilled a lot of confidence with the province as far as incorporating our way of life, our traditions, as well as looking at the support, that we provide on the health side, health professionals. So this was a really strong piece. So when they went to a war the first time, we were included with that. It's taken a little bit, as we know. Sometimes the red tape is a little bit challenging, but we were very determined, and again, very strong in what we're doing today. And just want to say thank you to Shilpa Stalker for her help. Also want to mention again just the guidance, the support from Jeff and the team as far as the support. We know that again, utilizing some of the the supports within the town is happening. So we are very pleased and honored to continue to work with the town moving forward. So again, just a bit of a background, and again, and as Cash mentioned, in the coming weeks, in the near future, we want to give a further wholesome kind of update, with community engagements within our nation, but also for the town as well too, just providing that update where we're at. So with that, we'll turn it back over to our team that's there in person. And my apologies, been fighting a cold here, so I'm working from home tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared.
I don't know if there's any questions on kind of the programming pieces. If not, we can turn it over to Shilpa.
Sure. Go ahead.
Good evening. I think it was about a year ago that we were in front of this group providing you with the vision of recovery community, what it was, how it would operate, and it's been 3 months since we really started construction. We thought it was really important to kind of give you a glimpse of what's happening. I know that construction is taking place and there's fences around the construction site for safety, and so it's our pleasure to let you know what the progress has been in the last 3 months and the impact on the town of Cardston. So, with that, if we look at, and you may remember our last presentation, recovery community is going to be situated on 15 acres, and it's along the highway going towards Waterton. Our journey has been long. We did have a launch that took place in 2023 in the summer, and we really didn't get a chance to go in and get all the pieces until this last summer. So anticipating that we could get something started in July, we started a pre-tender process in the summertime, and of course we're always worried about Mother Nature and what's going to happen through the construction, as well as costs, right? In case of cost, we want to make sure that we come in within budget if at all possible. So we started very early, and we started to get contracts starting to be awarded July 17th, with construction being mobilized and crews being mobilized July 29th. We have a super on-site 24/7 throughout the construction process, which we anticipate will take another at least a year, if not 18 to 24 months. The next one. So you may recall from our last presentation, this is what recovery communities look like, and I just wanted to show you this again to refresh your memory, so that when I show you pictures of the construction progress and how the pilings are coming along, you have a sense of what we're doing. And really there's 2 wings on either side, male and female, and then the middle is where we've got programming, we've got the dining area, and some programming areas. It's 75 beds in total, and it's a 60-40 split between men and women. We have situated it on the land so that we can have the view of the mountains, but then there's also coverage for weather. We anticipate that with the design and programming, we will have land change, lots of cultural aspects to it. So in the design and the way it's situated on the parcel, it will be quite conducive to that. When we began this journey, it was going to be a LEED certified facility. We meet most of the requirements of LEED, the way it's designed and with the construction materials that we will be using, but we're not necessarily going for LEED certification because that's just a whole other area of administration and cost that we don't need to include in this facility. And in terms of the design and the LEED certification, you'll notice in between each of the wings there's some green space that'll be used for gardens, and we hope to plant the type of plants, native grasses and seeds that would enable us to still make sure that the facility is quite effective and efficient from an environmental perspective as well as from a cultural perspective. Next one. So to give you a sense of what we're looking at, our CIP tiles were completed October 28th, and we're now working on gradings. The way we have done the constructions, we've got 8 zones, and so we are able to track progress based on zones. Synergy is a company that we're working with. We're also working with MPE. And so we're tracking progress based on the 8 zones. And at the rate that we're going, we're hoping for interior finishing to happen spring of 2026 and the project to be completed summer of 2026. As Cash mentioned, we've got sort of a parallel process. Construction is taking place, but we're also working on operations and programming. We recognize that human resource capacity needs to be built up. And the design of the facility, the functional design, followed the programming that we anticipate. So we're working side by side on those aspects. So the framing to be completed by summer 2025 and the windows and doors and cladding to be finished by fall 2025. At this point, we anticipate being very lucky with weather that we can still meet that. And of course, we've got that construction schedule. So unless something major happens, this is the schedule, and if anything, we may be able to push it up. And our teams are excellent. We've got big teams now, and so we're working towards trying to nudge away every month that we can. Go to the next one. In terms of milestones, so this gives aerial photos of when the piles were being put in, and then also with the grade beams put in that zone 1. So we did our elder blessing of the land on July 24th, and I believe we had representation. We mobilized construction July 29th, as I've said, and then we started excavating zone 1 and started pouring grade beams as we go along, and excavation for grade beams in zone 2 started in October, and then all the CIP piles were pretty much in place October 18th. One of the things that we were very clear when we were working with Synergy and MPE is that we, if at all possible, wanted local procurement. And so we have been very lucky at it. You may have seen advertisements within the town for labor. So we've asked all our contractors, subcontractors to look for local labor, not just in terms of blood tribe members, but also in the surrounding areas. And then we've also asked them to procure from local businesses if at all possible. And so I believe we've got literally a truckload of lumber sitting at where, and then where we've also been procuring other construction supplies. As we get construction updates, we have asked our team to let us know what is being utilized within town, and I think that's part of our accountability pieces as being good neighbors. So that's procurement. That's it. So that gives you a glimpse of what you can't see as you're driving by. We hope, as Cash said, we're going to have community engagement sessions, but we also hope to be able to keep you apprised at least once a quarter or as we hit some milestones to make sure that you folks know what's going on as far as construction in progress. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Councillor Jensen?
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say, wow, I am impressed that you have put your nose to the grindstone, got the job done, and I'm thrilled that you're working on this, and congratulations on completion. And I think it's fabulous, and I'm hats off to you.
Like you said, we've got a wonderful team, and we are pushing. I think originally when we started in July, our date was going to be November, and we pushed it up to July. So we're going to continue to push. We know that this is important, not just to the blood tribe, but the surrounding communities, and we will do everything we can to make sure that we're ready to go and running off the ground as soon as that facility is open.
Shifa, thank you for coming, and Cash, thank you also. I know that project is very dear to the blood tribe, and it's also important for us because we might become the recipient of a solution, partial solution for the problem that a few folks that are in town have, and it would be better rehabilitated in such a facility and become re-engaged in society, and I think that is very much pursued. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
About So the design, is it wood frame construction?
Yes, it is stick-built. The engineers, and so I'll answer this as best as I can with my limited knowledge. The engineers have, it took us 2 years in terms of functional design, and they have taken into consideration with the grade beams and everything else, the weather that we face, but we are stick-built. We looked at modular at one point to see if we could use some modular, especially the wings could be modular with the hub being stick-built. We decided not to do that because a modular unit would probably last about 20 years and the lifespan of the sucker is 50 years. With the thought that a facility like this could easily be transitioned into another use if another use is required, and that is our hope.
So there is some concrete in the foundation. Is that concrete being procured locally as well?
I believe we did, and we had to have additional testing done for that concrete to make sure that there was consistency. And if you want, I can probably find the name of the company, but I believe it is, as much as possible, was local.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else from any other members of council? Well, thank you very much for coming and telling us what's going on, and hopefully you'll be back to keep us posted as to your progress.
It would be our pleasure. This is a great partnership. There's going to be a lot more opportunities for the town as we move even towards programming, not just in terms of labor, but other procurement opportunities just due to the proximity. So we'd love to keep you up to date.
Yeah, I think generally, I think the community is looking forward to the success of this project for all of our benefits.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Derek. You feeling better?
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Maggie and team.
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Derek.
Hi.
Get better.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek.
I still went down.
Following their agenda then, we're at item 4, adoption of the minutes of the October 1st previous meeting. Councillor Brown.
Motion to adopt minutes from October 4th, 2024 CCW.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on those minutes from anyone? All right. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. All right. Item 5, bylaw and policy. I guess we're going to hear a little bit more from Josh on the unsightly property drop by.
Yeah, thank you, and good evening. The bylaw for you tonight is the unsightly property. So council on September 10th had requested a legal review, which was done by Ringgold University and was given back to us. So the amended version, based on all of their feedback, is what you're looking at. And so I'm here to answer any questions, take any of your input before you would look at the second review.
So,
Go ahead, Mayor.
so Josh, from what I could see, that really in the packet, I could see what's highlighted, which is the inspection. So there was a little bit of changes there. The 17C, there is a little bit of change in that area. And then under 24-25, appeal to courts. It's about all what I can see for changes. Is that correct?
No, the changes came, he had many comments, and we can certainly include that in your package for next time. So it was basically, remove this word here. For example, the definition of residential property. The old definition included solely, so it means any property that is solely used for residential purposes. Recommended that be removed. You wouldn't want business being able to use that to say this doesn't apply to us. So, but on the whole, there really
was legal, and there was no issues there. So the one amendment when it came to enforcement was the last bylaw had said if you're issued a ticket, you're allowed to pay it so long as you also remedy the contravention. And they said actually the court will take payment in place of, so you couldn't require that. So we mentioned.
Councillor Burton?
So given that, this relates to the same question asked last time. If they make their payment of the fine, then that prevents proceeding to court, does it still leave us the option of rectifying or remedying whatever the infraction is, or it's going in, cleaning it up at our cost, and eventually adding that to the tax? Not precluded from that by the payment fund.
No.
And then I didn't notice, so all of the amendments weren't highlighted because just with my current condition, I only look for amendments. So it talks about that they can pay right up to the day of court.
Yes.
That wasn't highlighted, but that's changed in there then.
That's right.
Okay, good.
Yeah, okay, so
I
that's.
think, given those comments, I think that was good of us, like a good plan to have them look that over, because all those little things become big things when you're trying to enforce it, right?
Sure.
Yes, that's where the rubber hits the road, and so I think I'm glad we did that. Good.
So this will be back before us, next meeting, is that the plan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, for a second reading and possibly a third reading.
Yeah, please.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just have a quick question on addition with this.
Sure.
With 11D, and it says, if a structure normally intended for human habitation is unoccupied, then any door or window opening in the structure is covered with a solid piece of wood, but only if the wood. And then it goes to D, coated with a protective finish. What does coated mean? Like, just give me with a varnish or paint, or what does coated mean?
Yeah. That would be the intent of that. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Jensen. All right. 6B is the, of course, financial 2024 situation. Jeff, do you want to?
Yeah, give me 1 second. You're on utility, I believe.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. That's my mistake. Yes, utility rate, and that is you.
Yeah. Okay, good. So, Council, you have an 8.5 by 14 sheet I gave out at the beginning. I want to just give some concept of where we administratively trying to take your feedback and then apply it into the rates. I want to talk about where we landed. Obviously, we can still do lots of massaging. I've got a couple of questions for you about how to look at these rates. The direction we were given the last meeting was to try and be somewhere around 3 or 4%, with the weight being higher on our institutional than our business and our residential. And so when we look at the changes, we can look at just percentage of rate change, but we also try and look at the percent change on the average bill. So what does it actually mean for the residents? It's one thing to say the rate did this, but what does it mean? So we have 3 categories I just want to present to you to get a feel for where we went with the rate. And Jill and I have been talking about this quite a bit the last few days, and there's a couple places that we could adjust how we're doing things, but bear with me, and I want to explain. So residential and commercial, that's the first category at the top. And again, this gives a whole history. We're looking at the 2 colored columns in the middle for the most part right now. And what we have here, concept or something to consider, is that the residential rate, if we increase the utility bills mostly on the flat rate, you would see an increase between water and sewer on the average of 2.9% for residential and commercial users. So just under 3%. When you go to the institutional, you would see an increase for what we call the smaller institutional, which we have a lot more of than large institutional. But of our small institutional, you see an increase on the average of about 6.2%. And what we did to get that is we essentially increased for institutional the flat rate on water and sewer much higher than we did the variable rate. So variable rates across the board we kept at a couple of percent, 2%, pretty basic. But we also, Jill did some work looking at the region. In fact, I should have her explain. That's not what I'm doing. But Jill looked at the region at what institutional rates look like, and our flat rate institutional is far behind what most institutional rates are regionally. And so we looked at that over 3 years. We didn't look to capture all that maybe in 2025, but we look at capturing that and getting closer to the regional flat rate over the next 3 years. So what you'll see for our small institutional is, on the average, 6.2%. Now you may be asking, why is the large institutional such a small increase? And that's because we made the biggest increase to the flat rate, not to the variable rate. So when you take 400 meters and divide it into the flat rate, it's a smaller increase because there's a bigger quantity. So there's a couple of reasons we use the flat rate, and we can certainly amend that. But one is it's more guaranteed income, so it isn't based on usage. It's income just being connected to the system. And you as a council have been, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you've been looking at utilities as a bit of a tax to get some tax out of the institutional properties. And the flat rate really prescribes that tax in many ways. So if you have a church that has a toilet that only flushes 3 times, and you base more on the consumption rate, you're really not going to see much return there. But if you base it on the flat rate, then you know that's consistent every month coming in as that tax. And so that was just an administrative preference for trying to structure the rates. But we can certainly look at any scenario. So the goal was to try and be overall around that 3 to 4% mark. This scenario, on the average, I'll always qualify, on the average, has our residential and our institutional, at least until the quantities get quite high, above that by 4%.
Councillor Brown and Councillor Burton.
So this looks good. I'm just a little nervous with the institutions because it just makes me nervous. It's not our goal to drive business out of Cardston, and sorry. As institution, hospital. I get it. Let me finish. And so my point is, I see the institutional, but are you saying that in Raymond, Fort McLeod, all the other areas that are about our side are above us?
Substantially.
Substantially.
100% higher. So like 100% higher than we are.
So
that's just on the flat rate, by the way. We have to do some analysis to see over how many cubic meters.
I guess B to the question is, how did we get so far behind?
So it just depends what the councils of the day use as a metric, right? So if you want to be in parity with, that's a completely different metric than doing it on an asset management basis or on a reasonable percentage per year, right? It's just a different way to look at it. And for example, if I might, Mr. Chairman, so and we'll be talking about this next meeting as well, on our electrical distribution rates, the methodology has always been parity with, and so we follow Fortis. Completely different than saying, well, we want to stick to 2 or 3. We don't even debate so much about, well, should it be 1% or 2%. We just say we want to be within an acceptable parity range of Fortis.
Thank you.
Mayor Kronen going in on Burton.
Jeff, maybe if you don't mind me asking, the institutional 50 cubic meters per month, which one are they? What are we looking for?
Well, I'm sorry I don't have the list. It would be almost all churches, because there's only just a few that are the large consumers. Hospital, temple.
Hospital and the cement.
That's commercial, not institutional. So hospital, Lee Crest, temple, probably Chinook. Those would be our large consumers. All of our churches, provincial building, and the other post office, all that stuff, that would be our small.
Okay.
Councillor Burton.
So as far as those metrics, to some degree, our asset management isn't correctly reflected this last time. So I think this is very useful. I was pushing for institutional to do it behind, so I'm glad you looked residential, commercial, and institutional. As a percentage. So if I look at this, we're right there for the institutional 6.2. Why do we lump residential and commercial together?
Largely because their rate structures are super similar. So we don't have different rates. There isn't a different consumption rate, for example, for residential or commercial water, as an example.
So back to my comments, who pays for it? I wouldn't be opposed, but I would be in favor of differentiating residential and commercial. The residential being the lowest of these, because the residents pay for all of it. Commercial being somewhere in between residential, because it's the people who buy the products in the business that pay for it. And a lot of those are in county reserve, or visiting leverage, that type of thing. In my mind, it makes sense that we would have it somewhat higher for commercial. Our end goal being to help utilities pay for themselves. Again, they're drastically short of that, but we have to cut that back for months. I think that's what it is. As much as possible, get the utilities to pay for themselves. Councillor Brown?
But that makes me nervous because I like the idea of having the two. Because if you look at our main street, we're starting to see more and more empty buildings. And so having a higher rate than our residents, that I think Cardston needs businesses, and we need to do what we can to keep the businesses. And so I like it right where it's at. I like to keep them together. I don't want to separate it and charge our local businesses more. That scares me.
Valid philosophy.
Yeah,
When
I get it.
weighing economic development.
I agree.
I agree with that concept.
Cardston.
You can even have, some municipalities have given a favorable rate on various forms of taxes. So
Right.
not a crazy idea at all.
Right.
So,
Right.
Councillor Brown, you saved me asking the question. I agree with you 100%. We run with the residential commercial together previously, and I personally don't see any reason to switch it out now. So I think I'm happy with this. Jeff, I have a question. Because we always heard that even though we embrace the idea of asset management, we're still behind the eight ball. It's basically very similar to what we've been running with in the previous version of the bylaw, correct?
So a number of the previous years, we've kind of taken a 3% across the board, right? We haven't really looked too much at breaking out the institutional at a more accelerated rate.
Yeah.
But I would say, as far as material dollars and cents at the end, it's going to be, at least in year one, so it's going to be terribly different. I should mention, like on the institutional, if you look at 26 and 27, we're increasing the institutional faster than we are the residential over 3 years as well.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said in my question that the residential commercial is more or less status quo, and we're adjusting higher the institutional.
Yeah, that's right.
I like that because I think I think it's appropriate for all of the things that Councillor Burton has been saying over the last few months and weeks. And secondly, it gets us closer to where we want to be, in terms of the idea of embracing asset management. So I'm okay with this.
But keep in mind, Council, that if you were just to say, hey, structure the rate so it covers the asset management fund, well then we're going to come back with something that says, here's a 94% increase, right? So we're mindful that you have all the political side of this to manage too. And so we're not simply going to jump into that kind of number where, so we're trying to phase a few things.
That begs the question, should we increase more? I mean, we started talking about that a few weeks ago. I don't know if there's an appetite there in the chamber, but I think we're moving in the right direction, and so we'll do baby steps. We can't do the giant steps.
I mean, for your residents, and may I ask you, and then we try to represent that here, for the average user, you're looking at $2 a month between water and sewer combined. This is really minor on the residential side. On our large institutional, you're getting at $25 a month. $14 on smaller institutional. You know, these aren't huge, but the institutional, when we bring you the 3-year bylaw, you will see that the institutional fixed rates are scheduled to grow far more aggressive than they have in the past. So I just want to be clear.
And the residential commercial is metered water.
Correct. Yeah.
And so the more you use, the more you pay. Users pay. That makes sense.
Yeah, on all of them, they're all metered. Everything in town is currently metered. And the one change.
Just maybe the clarification. There's a flat fee. There's both the fixed and the variable.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also just something, I guess maybe until Jill starts shaking her head telling me I've gone down the wrong path here. But interesting, on the commercial, the one difference in rates is that on the commercial properties, they would be paying, on the average, much higher sewer rates than the residential will, because there's a consumption portion to their sewer rate, which there is not on residential. So everyone at our home pays the X amount, the $54 a month, regardless. But on commercial, there's a fixed and a variable component. So they are paying more based on their consumption on the commercial side. It's the same rate per unit used, but it's more likely to have that component.
So, councillors, do we sort of have a straw poll or direction for, are we okay with this? Anybody vehemently opposed to what Jeff and Jill have presented today?
For me personally, I feel that these are very reasonable presentation and calculation. Yes, it does not meet the asset management plan, so I agree. But I also agree that we've been quite aggressive, as you can see, from 2018 to 2024. So I really think if you really put it together, done quite well in trying to improve the revenues for utilities. Yes, it does not cover the needs, and I agree with that.
Well, at least we're moving in the right direction, and we're setting a tone and a philosophy for future councils that asset management is important. I mean, in 2018, we were dramatically having to try and catch up, and obviously we're not there. We understand all that, but at least it's moving in the right direction, and philosophically, management, which I've said many times. Many municipalities our size aren't even doing this at all. So I think we're ahead of the game that way. So anything else from anybody else?
So we'll give you a chance to debate this a little more, but with a draft of a bylaw in front of you next meeting.
Okay,
so
that was
we'll put your rate structure in front of you next time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Jeff and Jill, for slogging through all of that. I appreciate it. We really appreciate that. So now we're 6A, recycling the Joshua, you've got something to enlighten us once again on that subject?
Yes. So since we spoke about this last time, which was I believe 2 meetings ago, just had an overall update about what extended producer responsibility is as far as who pays for recycling in Alberta going forward. So this is going to be a multi-year process occurring through a number of phases. We met with Cardston Support Services just a short time ago just to see how what their capacity is to manage recycling according to the regulation. There's definitely some challenges if they wanted to enter that space, storing the material, contamination requirements, and of the assets that they use in recycling at the facility there. So it doesn't seem to be a good opportunity for them, but Kim assured me that they're confident they have other sources of revenue. It's not going to break them in her rules. It's not something that they can rely on going forward. So just for the moment, we don't anticipate any changes to recycling in the short term in Cards. But certainly this is going to continue to go forward, and we'll keep it posted.
So as this moves forward and gets harder and more complicated for them to continue with their contract with us, what are we going to do? What are our options?
Well, our contract with them is not So we would just continue with Cardston Support Services until such time as the producer organization would come in and say, okay, we're mandated to start a depot in the community, and this is what we're going to do. And I imagine the crux of that question is,
when we reach that with support services, and they can't or won't or don't want to continue the service, then we will fall back on the program. Sign up for the program.
Well, the town may have another option to participate in the program, or just have the option of recycling through whenever they set up. So it doesn't manage it anymore. The producer would.
And that date isn't really known to us, but it could be in the next year or so.
In the next 2 years, it's reasonable.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Kronen.
I think you answered a lot of my questions. So if I understand properly, Josh, we opt out of phase one, totally opt out, by keeping the Kim and the group, the Cardston support services to carry on doing their work. Here is a question I have for you. The facilities I have really does not allow them to really have more than what they're able to handle right now. So at what point does it become a necessity for us, who have given them a building, to look after the issue of storing all those stuff? Because really, the building needs renovation or needs something. So at which time does we said, or demolish it, At which time, imagine that happening in the next year or so, then what? Where does it leave us?
Well, they would certainly be able to continue using the building if they wanted to for all of the other things that they do. A lot of building going through there. So if recycling came out, but to your point, the building needs some, and I think, meeting with Kim and getting to tour it is just the beginning of that conversation.
So we have a little bit of time.
Oh, certainly,
We're just hoping for a little bit of time.
Lots of time.
Anything else from anyone else? Okay, thank you, Joshua. Thank you. Now, Joe, 6B, you get to talk about the 2024 golf course financial picture.
I like this walking back and forth thing too. It's nice. I don't have to do every other thing. I mentioned just on that one, some people remember when the producer responsibility for recycling was announced, we were very quick to get in on phase one. We thought, let's get in on this. And as it started to develop, our confidence in how this was going to roll out began to wane. And all the depots especially are going to be managed. And Joshua, you may correct me, but it's still not super clear. I don't think anyone really knows the answer to that. And so we made the decision, and we've informed Circular Materials that we're fully opting out of phase one until they have a chance to get a few depots under their belt and see how they operate and see how that looks, and then we'll have a better idea how it might work for Cardston. So we jumped in quite ambitious at first, and now we're saying let's let some other towns be the guinea pig here. And we've got a program that's working, it's affordable, it's a good program in the community, and we'll keep that going for another year or so. So I just wanted to mention from my point of view on that. As far as golf, I'm actually quite pleased to present you with some numbers on the golf course. I got really nervous in June. Councillor Finley and I commiserated and wrung our hands collectively about what was going to happen at the golf course, and then in July our green fee numbers picked right up, and then they hit a really good rate through the rest of the season. So we ended our revenue up from last year by about $50,000, but at the end of the day, and I give credit to Josh Tonavold in the outside department and April in the clubhouse. is that we talked a lot when the season started about containing expenses and making sure our labor stayed under control. And you've heard me preach this before, this isn't new to you, that it's our labor that will get us fast. Now, unfortunately, and this sounds counterintuitive, but unfortunately labor was down because we didn't have our manager there for most of the season. And I would have preferred that we had him there and that labor was up a little bit in that category. That would have been my preference. But we didn't have that, unfortunately. But we did learn some things about, what it takes to run a course and the expertise that we need and prefer, and all those things will go into our decisions for next season. The yellow items you can see, we still do have some costs coming in. And Councillor Kemley, I hope you saw my email. I had shown you this earlier with a little different number, and then a fuel bill came in for $7,000. And so that changed our numbers just a touch. But all in all, I consider it a break-even operationally. And I say that breaking even after covering the transfer to reserves of $192,000. So we can fully transfer that to reserves this year out of the operational revenues, which I am blown away and ecstatic that we can do that, and covering the payments on the golf carts out of the
Councillor Brown.
I don't think I've only been for 7 years. But have we ever had that?
So two things. No is the short answer.
Yeah.
The longer answer is we've never tried to transfer to reserves this aggressively before. Right? New territory for us, and you'll remember me being somewhat pessimistic in the spring about this number is way too big. This is a scary number. There's no way, but always knowing that if revenues weren't where they need to be, we would shift down the transfer to reserves. We didn't have to run into the red. That was a discretionary number, and I have that note there. It's not a mandatory expense, but it supports the golf master plan. So because of how, again, our departments manage their fuel, they manage their labor, materials quite well. In some of my forecasts, there's actually like $10,000 in the machinery budget for Josh to work on machinery over the winter. So we have a number of our older carts that could use a really good overhaul over the winter months, so that we can keep them going for a couple more years. I'd like to get out of this payment before I incur another one, if we could. That would be the preference. So all in all, Council, I'm actually quite pleased where this landed, and I think it gives us an idea that if we are careful and if we manage the level of service to some degree, we can, and actually every year I get a little more confident in where the revenues of that course will land, right? Because we just did not know post-COVID how this was going to work, and it's maintaining, and I'm encouraged. I think the clubhouse has only helped maintain that revenue and maintain the interest in the course. So, hopefully increase it. So I think that's all good. Councillor Kemley and I, just so you know, this is a little off topic, and I'll bring this to a future meeting, maybe next one, but probably the later one. We did do some review of food service provider proposals, so we'll talk about that in the near future here. So that's really what I wanted to touch on. The capital was funded from reserves, and so that broke even because it's exactly how we budgeted it. And other than that, that's if there's any questions on that. I mean, we'll have more precise numbers as we get closer to the end of the year. And I am hoping to hold a meeting of just interested community members, golf members, and be able to talk about clubhouse plans and the financials and capital planning. And I'd like to do that either maybe the end of this month or in January. And just hold a bit of a community meeting up here at the golf course, for the golf course, that interested people can come and sit in on. So this is all forms part of that. And this is a good news story, in my opinion, by the way. This is a happy story.
Sure, go ahead, Mayor.
Jeff, I want to really honestly congratulate you on having had such an important hand on the management of the course this year. You really worked hard with Mr. Donovan. He needed a much guidance, and you helped him greatly. Helped the management of the clubhouse deal with quite a few issues. You have gone a long ways to help us with this golf course. It was, I know, a difficult time, but it was all worthwhile.
Well, and great people, and I appreciate that, Mayor, I really do, but great people like Howie and April and this summer. They did not want that or ask for it, but they took it on. And I just have so much gratitude for what they've been able to do this year. And, you know, Josh was his first year cutting his teeth there. I don't want to do an evaluation of him publicly, but I would say that without some day-to-day mentorship in managing the staff, he held things together very well. I've spoken to a number of golfers, Councillor Kenley, mostly about condition of the course was excellent from start to finish this season. So I think he did. I had nothing to do with condition of the course. He did a very good job in holding that together with the staff we have, for sure.
So pass on our thanks
I will.
to the whole staff. Honestly, they deserve our thanks and yours.
Thank you very much.
It's always good to get good news like this at the conclusion of the season, so good on all of you.
Yeah, no, I was very happy when I ran the numbers. I was pleased with that story.
Councillor Burton.
Just related to operation, to me it's important to make sure that our youth have access and mentorship and all of that. I think it's good for them, I think it's good for the town, I think it's good later on when they start paying memberships, of course. Is there a trend? Are we doing our best in helping the youth participate? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it stagnant?
I think we've done a lot to help them.
So tell me if I might, Mr. Chairman.
And I don't have an opinion, I'm purely asking. I don't know.
So tell me if you agree with this. I don't have a whiteboard, but it would go something like, well, nothing, massive hockey stick spike, and then down and kind of flat. And let me explain. We went, because I can't remember, it was right before Paul. Yeah, so just before Paul, we were talking about this with our committee. I don't remember who was on it at that time, but very concerned about how do you look at sustainability of youth playing? Like, who's paying $1,200 in a couple of years for these memberships? And so we changed, essentially, this was $49, $79, and $99 memberships for youth. And that year, I think we went up to, and please if I'm exaggerating, I think it was 83 youth memberships from, I think, 3. Right, so it was that kind of trajectory, and if you like to play percentages on small numbers, amazing, right? And part of it was Paul, who instituted really cool youth programs, who was doing Monday night youth programs. Ken McMurray and Melvin Easthope were helping, volunteering with youth programs, and it was excellent. Like, it was great. Everyone was thrilled. We lost Paul, and some of the momentum of that went away, but a number of those kids stayed and are playing the game. We've had a couple of great success stories in the community where we've had kids like Graydon Woodward, and who's gone on to college to play golf, and that's inspiring a lot of his friends and peers and kids that know him. He comes and works for us in the summer. The Pre Boy has been playing all over the country this year and having a high level of success, and so their friends are engaged in the game. And so we have a bit of a buzz. One of the challenges we had again this year is we didn't run any specific youth programming because we didn't have our CPG manager. And those are the types of things that, well, yes, your numbers are okay, some of that stuff falls off. So sometimes your men's and women's leagues and your youth leagues, they're not where they could be. You maybe don't see it in the financials, but you will over time if you don't shore up that program.
Could I just
Sorry, Councillor Brown first.
Go.
Okay, cool. So,
All right.
thank you. I guess if we could maybe forward the message to the committee that I'm sure they'd be on board as much as possible, because there's the social reasons for having them there. There's the physical health reasons, mental health reasons, and the business reasons. Like, even if we did nothing else to say selfishly, to make it viable going forward, those are the guys, and Melvin Easthope's still in the community,
Ken Murray's still here.
Yeah, so I'd hate to see that go back to 3. Maybe it could be 103 instead of 83 at some point.
Yeah, sure.
So it was 6 years ago. That's when Melvin Easthope and Ken McMurray, I was on the golf. That's when we started it, because we didn't have the youth program, and it was astronomical for the kids to play, which is why we had no kids playing. And it was Ken McMurray and Melvin Easthope who said, we will start mentoring these kids. So they're the ones that helped us create that program, which was fantastic. And it they spiked us because we all of a sudden had tons. But I guess my question, or to Councillor Kinley could take it back maybe to the golfing community, is like, wouldn't it be great to have mentoring, to have some of these, like Ken McMurray, some of these guys have mentored so much in the community, but could we not have others step forward? And what if we had, you got a discount on your rate if you were willing to mentor, you know, once a month or whatever it is? I just think it's a building that needs to continue. I think it is the future of the golf. The whole community. We need some more mentoring to happen. And I would be willing to push for, you know, some sort of discounted rate for those lanes. I just think that's, yeah, just a thought.
My son, by the way, 6 years ago would have been 14 and hadn't golfed at all, and then had a membership, youth membership, all the way till he went to college, right? And so he's now, him and his buddies, the four of them would go out all the time golfing, and it was a great thing for him to get involved in, but it was $79 a season for the kid to golf. Like, that was a no-brainer stocking stuffer for the kid, right? Like,
well, my son golfed lots, worked out there, but I couldn't afford to give him one back in the day when he was 14, or I would have. That would have been like a brilliant thing to happen, which is why we really pushed for it, right? So I just think the mentoring program, we need some sort of mentoring program.
Thank you.
Okay. All good? All right. Don't know where, Jeff. Next item.
I'm not.
Is the Tourist Information Center review.
So really just for information, this came up a couple meetings ago, and so I had a chance to meet with Mr. Scott. We had a good visit about the year, and he usually does provide statistics, by the way, but I don't think we got them to you for a while. So I asked him just to put a very simple analytics together. You can see the numbers there. Like is expected, so much of our traffic shifts to web and social media-based traffic. And to have someone on the other end of that making the replies and the responses and sending the information is just absolutely critical. There's nothing worse than sending that inquiry in through a website and then hearing nothing back. That's not productive at all. And so I do want to mention that the website and all that stuff is stuff that Mr. Scott is doing outside of the contract just to support the visitation and tourism efforts. He is not contractually obligated to do that. And so he does that and takes care of all that labor, and I really appreciated that because that is, we go from 14, almost 15,000 web visitations and 1,800 people walking in the facility. And so those people in the facility are answering the web inquiries, they're responding on social media. He did allude, and these were fun programs. Post-COVID, we found some funding where we were sending out the kids, I call them kids, that might not be fair, but the staff at the information center, they were going out to events, and they'd have a tablet, and where are you from, and here's what you can do. And so he's always trying some interesting things like that. We haven't been able to secure that funding for the last couple of years, but if there's any questions about that, I can answer them or take it back to Mr.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Jeff, I really appreciated that analytic. It was really good and to the point. It's what we wanted. What I was wondering, his contract, is it 2-year contract or 5-year?
If Jill told me that exactly, she was going to eat your dinner. I believe that, what, Mayor, I'd rather look at that and tell you. I just don't remember, but I'll make a note here.
But the reason I'm asking is not because he's not doing a great job. I think he's doing exactly what we want him to do. But it's more or less to understand, is he still interested in carrying on with looking after our information center?
Right.
If the contract was to be renewed, is he still interested in something like that? I mean, I know it's open to the community.
So I don't want to publicly negotiate this contract for him, but we had this explicit conversation and the answer is yes.
That's all I wanted to know.
So in the past, at least two of my kids have worked here.
But, yeah, he has
Presumably from our.
not, yeah, he has staff that isn't him that's manning it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know, I usually stop in and just say hi or whatever,
Yeah.
and just see what happens.
So he did.
Councillor Jensen?
Okay, so I brought this up mainly because not this year. I must admit I did not go into the tourist information from try to go to the tourist information this summer, but last summer I did. Tried several times. It's never anyone. So my thinking was, and when I see foot people that actually entered 1,800, I just kind of wonder if it's not, if it wouldn't be better if we just passed it to Remington Center where they could do the tourist information thing. They're set up for it already. They already have a booth, and where they actually need people to come and go through the center. You know, if they're already there asking about what to do in Cardston, and take a tour through the Remington Center. It just made more sense to me. You know, it's nothing against this fellow. I don't even really know him. I just looking at it and thinking, you know, nobody's going there. So,
That's not true. People.
well, it is all, which is, you know, I don't know. And according to this, the numbers are declining big time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the contract is not only to worry about the food truck. The contract, as you can see, the contract deals with a lot more than that. Just everything that is on social media, which is where the traffic is. But as to your proposal, I don't really know how you can do a municipal contract within a federal facility, a provincial facility. It doesn't seem to matter.
If I might, the town owns that building. So the town owns that building and lease the land the building is on from infrastructure. It's a very interesting scenario.
Yeah.
So the town, sorry, you were talking about the Remington, weren't you, Mayor? Sorry, but yeah, so the Tourist Information Center the town owns, but we do not own the land that it's on. We lease the land from infrastructure.
I'm not sure you can do that.
Well, I can show you an arrangement whereby it's happening, Councillor.
Councillor Burton, it will blow your mind, but it's the way it is.
So it's partially due because that's how the province funded most all of it, right? And so, but they don't want the burden of operating it. And so that's how they've managed it. It's been a number of years, but we went up and down this lease. In fact, previous council, we tried to purchase all the land that it's on plus a chunk of the parking lot.
Yes.
We tried to get infrastructure to declare it surplus, and they declared a portion of it surplus for, in my opinion, they declared a portion of the surplus for an unreasonable price. Let's put it that way. And so we didn't go anywhere with it.
And I sit on the Friends of Remington Society now. I don't know that there's enough at Remington that they would want to take this on. They've got their hands full with what they're doing. So I would suggest that we start programs.
I can speak, Councillor, that back a number of years ago, and Dan and Stewart was still at the Remington, and at that time they were doing operations for Frank Slide and for the Head Smashed In and dealing with seasonal staff, and we proposed it to them at the time, and they declined to take that on, and they were in the business at the time, and I don't think they are anymore.
Be increasing staff, and I've never heard anybody express
So myself and 4 other CAOs in the region met with Global Builds about 2 weeks ago. This is a company that's trying to duplicate a model of rolling daycare spots. They did this 22 units, about 1,700 daycare spots in Manitoba. The province of Alberta is currently sitting on funding for daycare spots and looking for a partner to roll out. And so these guys are looking to make a proposal to the province. At the very end of that, all those slides, I won't go through any of those slides, you can use it at time. There was a letter of intent, and they were looking for municipalities to, at the least, express interest in saying our community could use some daycare spots, and we'd be interested in looking at this a little further. I did sign a letter of intent and sent it back to them. They're taking these aggregate numbers back to the province and saying, we have potential interest in developing this with X communities for X amount of spots. It's a very interesting model, so the town they would be looking for the town to put up a serviced parcel of land, and then they would build the facility, they would put an operator in the facility, and the town would own the facility and the land in perpetuity. We would be the owner of it. So one of the reasons they focused down here, and I met with most of my Southern Alberta colleagues on this, was because we've been identified as one of the areas where we have a major lack of daycare spaces in the province. So there's a huge gap down here. I think Joshua spoke to this a little bit a few months ago. The province put out some information just showing that. And so these are looking to potentially fill a need where they're not looking for the municipality to put up capital except for land. And then they would arrange the operations and everything like that.
Councillor Brown and then Burton.
I own one.
I was going to say, wow. I will say, I was a little out to lunch on this because previously when this was brought up, I was completely against it because I just thought we don't need one more dang bit of government overstepping in our municipalities. This time, I will say, having a daughter-in-law that is looking for daycare and can't find it. In McGregor, my hairdresser can't find it. You know, all these communities surrounding us, no one can find any, and they all want to work. They don't have anyone trust that. I mean, they just aren't doing it now. And I had no idea it was as bad as it is. So I'm glad you sent out the letter. Thank you.
Councillor Burton and then Mayor.
So Jeff, in their model, you have the privilege of owning the building.
And you have the burden of it as well.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes.
I was agree with that. And then when the manager gets the West Nile disease, we have to step in and the buck stop back and the town to really do it. So
operationally, we grilled them on this fairly well. So someone in the private sector takes this on. So they arrange for operators of these facilities. And we are not operationally obligated to do anything with this facility. The reason they put it back to the town is, first of all, it's federal and provincial money. They're paying 100% capital. So they're paying for landscaping, parking lot, the whole 9 yards. And so it isn't appropriate for that to go into the hands of the private sector should the business dissolve or something would happen. It's a backstop of the municipality to say, okay, we're going to take this on and see where it can go. But there are obligations that come with that, for sure. But
I'm of the same opinion, even with the demand, that the town doesn't need to be in big business.
Well, we wouldn't.
So, I'm just making sure that we're lifting and having anything, because if at some point we're saying no, for $8 million we can fix the building, Or all of a sudden, Jeff's not only running the golf course, he's now running the daycare.
Imagine.
No.
Humanity.
So anyway, we just have to be careful that we know what we're getting into. If it's donating land, I'm probably for that. If it's something more than that, I'm not for it.
It sounds like the liability wouldn't extend, that we would have to take it over if Brand X.
Let's be really careful about that.
Yes. This is just exploratory
I know.
right now.
I realize that.
But at the same time, I hear what you're saying, because like the garbage recycling, it's fantastic, and we're all on board, and now we're like, whoa, let's just pay attention here. So I feel the exact same way. Right now, I'm like all over it, ish, right? Like, but we'll see.
Why don't we see where it goes? That's all we're doing
sure,
right now.
for sure.
Okay? Go ahead, Mark.
Regarding the needs in our community, there was some needs that were totally expressed to us a while back by the manager of the hospital, saying that retention of staff for them is difficult, or attracting new staff is difficult, because there is no daycare around here. And for them, that was the first time that we heard that notion that what about the town looking into that idea of daycare around here, figuring out how we could attract daycare. Well, that's an opportunity. I think there is reservations regarding the model. We need to understand it properly. But I think the need of daycare is, in my mind, very urgent. I hear that as request, and there is probably teachers that would like to have that service too. That will make it more attractive for them too.
Councillor Jensen.
Okay, just to be clear, I'm not opposed to this, but I am concerned about those who are already providing daycare in their homes. What happens to those people? Because that's part of their livelihood. You know, do they provide them daycare in a box? Or what happens to them?
So I can answer that. So the ones that are, so there's a difference between me taking a bunch of kids. I'm not going to get funded by the government for that. There's no subsidy if I watch the kids. But if Joe Blow has done all the hoops that are, and I know of 2 in Cardston that are day homes, or daycares, I'm not sure, but they get funding. And so the government subsidizes, so if you work, they'll pay. And what I can tell you is, all of them have long waiting lists.
So would they still be able to
continue
on? Or would we be taking away from them?
No, completely separate.
It's not we're not running this thing.
I hear what you're saying, and no, it is not us taking business away from them, because they, and again, I know this personally, because my daughter-in-law was just looking into this, but they have waiting lists, and they're like, I'm sorry, can we say in 2 years? 2 years? Like, what am I supposed to not work for 2 years? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So no, they're doing fine, it appears. It does not take away from them. It might be bringing more people to Cardston to fill more jobs, because now all of a sudden we have daycare.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to make a motion for a break.
All right, sir.
No, I'm just...
Took the words right out of my mouth. I would entertain a motion to take a 15-minute dinner break.
That's what you said?
Yeah.
All in favor? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Questions, number 7? Any questions from anybody? No? So 8A, the Cardston County Committee assignments, they sent us a letter to the ICF committee. Is it the same people?
As far as I know.
Yeah. So that's just information, right? So carry on with that. And our people are the same, so that's okay. 8B, the District Health Delivery Association, a letter of thanks. That's straightforward. Nice to get that.
Can you maybe address, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Can you maybe explain what that money comes from? Because they made it sound like the town was giving them that money, but actually is an endowment fund.
You know, I'm not, yes, there's some money donated to the town years ago, and we take the endowment and we go between the Chinook Foundation and the Health Auxiliary.
Yes, that's what it is. So it's not the town directly, it was the fund that's making it.
8C, Mr. Gandam, that's with the
Sixth resolution.
yeah, that they didn't get to at the AGM, sorry, the conference. I don't know, I guess it's, do we want to go through that and try and get our council to do something with it with them, or do we just want to let it go? Here?
You can go online, you can vote and give your opinion on each other if you want.
And if you don't?
I mean, you don't vote, you give your opinion
Yeah.
on them, and
Because-
the board will vote
Yeah.
on our behalf.
So there's probably not a whole lot for us to do unless somebody's got a desire on one of those 6 items, otherwise we could probably just let it go the way it is. Okay, and Rick McIver sent us a letter indicating what our new funding grants are. And I guess the good thing is that
It's on the up.
it's earlier than normal, and we'll be able to plug those numbers into our provisional budget for the end of December, right? Do you want to comment on that, Jeff? No? That's right, okay. So then, I need a motion to go into closed session.
Motion to go in closed session.
Okay, all in favor?